this Michael Eddy? Is this Michael Eddy? You related to Michael Eddy?
Is this Michael Eddy?
Yes, it is.
All right, you're just going to have to...
All they do is...
Y'all,
Hey, let's go have some coffee.
feeding into it.
Let's go have coffee. Let's go have some coffee. You want to go have some coffee, Donna?
I mean, instead of standing back around, feeding into it.
I know, don't talk.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Are we making you look bad, or that y'all can't control your temper making you look bad?
See, that's exactly
That's right. I do appreciate you having a conversation with me. I'd love to know what else is going on here. But I'm saying, seriously, like, there are some things that I really enjoy, that I care about. This isn't one of them. I'm saying there are some things that I really enjoy. Here's what I believe. I believe that the day I became a Christian, I set aside my cultural heritage as something that was of primary importance. That became way secondary, if that.
In other words, you're throwing your back in your
Greek or Jew, right? What everybody thinks. The Greek heritage, the Jewish heritage, that was a problem. That was one of the biggest problems the Apostle Paul was trying to find. He was holding on to the Jewish heritage. I'm saying this is insane. Those Jews back there were hindering the spread of the gospel. So they had to lay that aside. As much as they loved their forefathers, as much as they loved all that, they set it aside and they realized it's hindering the gospel. You look around the world and you say, those Christians flying out with the flag and they don't want to hear it. That's an issue. We're doing fine. You don't have to listen to her, sir. We're doing fine in this conversation. But thank you. I mean, if you want to be a part of the conversation, we can talk about it. We were just talking about the Jews. You know how in the Bible it said there's no more Jew or Greek? Everybody who's becoming a Christian. Those Jews set aside the heritage of their fathers.
Here comes two more, all right.
Okay, maybe they'll have some discussion. But do you see my point, sir? You see the point I'm trying to present? It's okay to say yes if you can just, I'm not asking if you agree with it, I'm saying you see what I'm talking about.
Ho, ho, here we go. Valley, ho, valley.
I get it. I get it. And it's even hard. You see what's going on here? It's even hard for you to say yes, I see your point because of the social pressure. If you and I were discussing on your point on your porch, we wouldn't be having this difficulty. You got to stop hanging around folk that are actually squelching your free speech being discussion issues. That's what's going on.
I was going to say yes, I didn't want to say yes. I'm here supporting my heritage.
Yes, but we were. See what's going on here? This is what I'm talking about. She steps right on your speech. She steps right on your speech. Tries to control what you do, and you are a man. And she's over here trying to control your speech. Right. You see what I'm just talking about? Why is she running right here trying to get everybody to stop talking about it? Yes, sir. Well, you just saw my point. I'm not offended. I'm not offended by your van. Like, it doesn't hurt me, but I'm saying it does bother other people. I know that you want to spread the gospel.
Because other people do not know their history.
The history of the Bible is that not
The history of the Civil War.
But is the Bible, which is more important? Which is more important? If discussing a certain set of facts is hindering the spread of the gospel, isn't it all right to just go ahead and say we're going to put that on the back burner? You can teach about history without doing this. This display is actually keeping people. When people come out and they line up on the sidewalk and they fly these flags, people are not learning history. What they do is they see this image and they associate it directly with the oppression of the people. And it keeps those people from wanting to hear anything from you. Like if somebody recognizes your face and they happen to be a black person, they're not going to want to hear the gospel from you. You limit your ability to share about Jesus Christ when you do that. You see what I'm saying? So why would we continue to do that? I think you know why now. One is going to be more important than the other.
Keep going with it.
Okay, well, I appreciate you talking.
You believe what you believe, I believe what I believe.
Well, you said you're a Christian. We're supposed to be believing the same thing. So it's not this business about when you believe what you believe, not what I believe. We're supposed to be able to go to the like to have? Would you be willing to have a Bible study with us? I'm saying apart from all this, would you be willing to have a Bible study with us? You would? Okay. Can we exchange numbers and maybe we can set something up?
Not at this time.
Where did my phone go?
Is that in your pocket?
I don't know. I think it's lost it somewhere. Or maybe it's in my own too. So you don't want to exchange numbers just now? Okay. Well, let's see. Here's what I can do. Can I give you a flyer? If you call that number at the top, you'll get my number. What's your number?
Yeah, that's my number.
Okay, look, we're friendly. We disagree strongly over this. We're friendly folks. We can have a reasonable discussion. And there's more than talking about this, I would love to discuss the Bible with you.
What Bible is that that you use?
King James, sir.
King James?
Yes, sir.
That's the only one I would use.
All right. Okay, well, let's get together and look at it. Thank you.
We got some new people. We could talk to this lady. Ma'am, would you mind giving us a statement just as a passerby?
A statement?
Yeah, we're Christians, and we're saying what they're doing. I'm not going to put you on TV, so you don't have to worry about that. I won't. What we're asking them,
These are lovers. They just love the South.
but this flag, I'm saying the vice
It
president.
has a different meaning to different people.
So
Would you
what
fly
about
one?
the black people?
Would you fly one, ma'am?
So positive about it every week.
What you say? You answer though? Yeah. Hey, well, I ain't saying something like
We're out here trying to talk these folk out of putting down the rebel flag.
Talk them out of it?
Yeah, and discussing about Christianity. How do you feel about this flag?
Huh?
How do you feel about
This is
this?
the last Confederate capital. That's a Confederate flag.
Would you fly one?
Huh?
Would you fly one?
I mean, personally, if I had a granddaddy in the war, I would, but I probably didn't. It doesn't bother me. It's not like they won. Huh? Well, you know what I mean. Back in the Civil War time. You act like it's still happening to this day. You think so?
Yeah. I think you know it too.
Huh? Well, the media's trying to start one.
Start a what? A war?
Yeah. Between
well-
people. They've been pushing the race button for the longest time now.
When you
There's
see
an
this
agenda behind it.
when you see this flag, what do you think it primarily stood for during the Civil War? What was the fight over?
Land. I don't know the history, honestly, so I'm not going to act like I do.
Okay.
But like, it was one thing. It was like way back in the day. You know, like I can drink out the water fountain just fine now. I've never cared about that flag.
Okay. Are you a religious individual?
Yes.
What? Are you a Christian?
Yes.
Okay. As a Christian, do you think that it would actually hinder the cause? These folks, some of them at least, call themselves Christians. Now, what we're trying to explain to them is when we go out and door knock in the community, very frequently we run into individuals that they associate Christians with that flag, especially like folk of the Baptist denomination. And what we're saying is when individuals get a negative impression about that flag because they say it represents...
Okay, thank you very much for joining me today. I'm Johnny Robertson. We are in our What Does the Bible Say school, and we're just in a normal day. Someone just called me, and I had 10 seconds till time to go, and I ended up having to say 10 seconds till airtime. And so, hopefully I got everything together. I was wanting to get a couple of books and make sure that you get to see the books that we're using, and maybe you can come across some books similar to that. Similar to these. Can I just tell you we are live on YouTube, by the way, and if you wanted to help us with today's program, what you could do, you could get on YouTube, and you could just basically tell a friend about our YouTube channel. Let's go to YouTube. Type in Johnny Robertson, and so this is what you would see. And I just was able to tell someone yesterday about the gear, and I'm just going to go through this with you, the speed gear. Let me see if I can get up a YouTube video, a random YouTube video. Let's see. Here's a random video. Okay, if you're watching, You can see my cursor moving around. See it moving around there? Right here is your full screen. Basically touching the full screen, but I'm not going there. This is a gear. Can you see that? That's a sprocket, or it is a gear. If you were to click it, you'll notice that it has play speed. We are at normal right now. You have the option to listen to, this happens to be Ron DeSantis, it's just something that came up, and I put it on 1.75, which is almost double time. Let's listen just a second.
CPAC, let me welcome you to the freest state in these United States.
Now he's speaking 1.7, almost double time. Let me get somebody else. Let's just see. Here's Duck Dynasty. We're still we're in the 1.75 playback mode. Listen to this.
What about you?
So, Jay,
Happened, so we can continue with
well,
life.
we've already talked on a previous podcast about how meatloaf affects it. So
He's on the no meatloaf thing. Look, so we came back from look.
Well, he's close to the trusty wood.
So, Dad, does he get that from you or from Mom? This about
from me.
because Dad can count on one hand.
Yeah.
How many times he
Can you tell me
Here's
it's
what's
going
funny.
faster?
So we just finished it.
Now, with those two guys, they may be ginned up, and it may be that 1.75 is too much. Here's double time.
a week off now from filming. And so when I was coming back home, I was like, wait, I said, babe, are you cooking anything? Because we were out of town, obviously, and we're driving back. She's like, I was thinking meatloaf. And I said, oh no.
So basically, that's the way it is. I could have just as easily used one of my own YouTubes. That would have probably made more sense. But what's the point of that? The point is you can actually watch our broadcast, 2-hour broadcast, and you can watch it in an hour at double time by using that gear. So I don't mind that. As a matter of fact, I watch everything at least 1.75 nowadays. I never use normal speed. I am a very busy individual, and I can listen to an hour broadcast. As a matter of fact, Caleb's broadcast yesterday, I was still studying when his broadcast started. I tuned in an hour into the show, and I put him on double speed, and I backed it up to the beginning, and I was through by the time he got through. So I caught up to him. I listened to him in double speed. I could understand very well what he was saying, and I was able to keep doing my study for an hour, and then I needed to drive, so I turned him on double speed, and I listened to 2 hours in an hour. Okay. Here is a hint that I want to give you about books. This is a survey of Israel's history by Leon Wood. It is a fantastic book. I'm going to let you get close enough, I hope, to be able to see a few things in it. I may end up not having the ability to keep that light from washing out the page. I think I'm not going to be able to do it. There we go. Those are books. I mean, that is actually a bibliography. In other words, these are the books that this gentleman referred to as he was putting this book together. How many pages are there of research? That's what you're actually doing. 413 to, and this is going to make sense in just a second. 416 to, that's basically 3 pages front and back. And listen, y'all, this is what I do. If I'm reading a good book and he starts giving me footnotes from other books, and I'm saying I'm really reading a good book, this is a great book, and the footnotes are right down here at the bottom. And when I see the footnotes and he tells me who it is that he's quoting, I start looking for those books. I'm saying if you find a really great book, you look at the footnotes and you see who it is that he's quoting, and then you start trying to find those particular books as well. He quotes from Samuel J. Schultz. I already had Samuel J. Schultz, and I did not know that Wood was going to quote from him. So this is the Old Testament Speaks, 3rd edition, Wood's book, A Survey of Israel's History. This was printed 5 times in 4 years, reprinted 5 times in 4 years. That tells you that it was, when it hit the market, people loved it. I love it. It does a fantastic job on particularly Samuel, Kings, Chronicles. As we've been advertising over and over, Harmony of Samuel, Kings, and Chronicle by William Day Crockett. And it allows you to be able to read it all at the same time. It's if you happen to have something that's repeated 3 times in 3 different books, like for instance 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, and 1 Chronicles, it'll be all on the page. You'll be able to see it all at one time. Great tool. Here's a great tool, Muscle and a Shovel. This is actually the account of a conversion, and the reason it's titled Muscle and a Shovel, your brain is a muscle. You're gonna have to use it, and you're gonna have to dig deep in order to get to the truth. So that's actually a gentleman who obeyed the gospel out of the Baptist church, and he has continually been helping individuals find the truth. There's no telling how many individuals have read that particular account. Jesus as a controversialist. You need to read this because it's number one, it's back in print, and it was actually printed the first time in 1911. You're reading something that, books today can be very light in the sense of the content. If you're reading something from 100 years ago, then a lot of times I just end up with some very great information. So I actually thought I had one more that I didn't bring in. There's another commentary that I have on Kings and Chronicles, Strong's Concordance. I use one. What you might say, you've got a Bible program. I do. But I can actually go through and quickly, if I got my Bible program to something else, I don't always carry my computer with me, so, Strong's Concordance, they're great tools. They're easily found in a Goodwill. Goodyear. This is a good book, God at a Distance. It's written by a gentleman named Carey Duke. I don't agree with everything Carey Duke says or does, but I will say he did a great job on God at a Distance. What this book is about is it is about why it is that God cannot have just like real time with us. Why does he have to keep himself just beyond the physical realm and stay in the spiritual realm? Well, for one thing, if God came out of the physical realm, and people who are saying that they've seen God in the Bible, they did not see God. They were actually talking to an angel. No one has seen God. When the Bible talks about individuals, angelic beings, oftentimes it just says the Lord or God because they're speaking for God. When the king speaks, basically, when the word of the king speaks, the power of the king is in his words. When an angelic being is speaking, they're speaking verbatim what God would want you to know. You can't disbelieve if God were to appear. God's presence would be such that now you're not in a realm where you can deny God. You would be overwhelmed by the actual presence of God. This is a great book, and it talks about how it is that God reveals himself and how you have to behave yourself mentally in order to get the message. And that's very, very important. And there are a lot of people who are not getting the message. One of the real reasons, I would say one of the strongest reasons people are not getting the message is because the message is so convoluted. People are so divisive, and they speak things that they don't even believe oftentimes. There are plenty of people that are in it for the money. And so this is a very, very important thing for us to get a handle on what really the Bible says. Now, what I want to do with you today is I absolutely refuse to go through the Kings and the Chronicles. Caleb's doing the Chronicles. I'm doing the Kings. I'm going to be in Chronicles at different times too, because there's certain things that you can't find out in the Kings. I absolutely refuse to do the basic brotherhood type thing where I go in and I just basically start with Jeroboam telling you that Jeroboam brought in a calf at Bethel. There are so many elements that you need to grasp, that need to be gotten a hold to be able to understand the overall actions and behavior. And not only that, y'all, we're learning our own self. We're learning how these individuals dealt with each other. We're finding out why they couldn't deal with each other. God has stretched this thing out in front of us, not for us to pick at them. He has stretched it out, and He has is allowing us to see the flaws that people actually have. And when you see those flaws, it's not for you to push the button like, some of these shows where you push the button and you go through just a chute and it's sludge, or you hit the bottom of a water or whatever. It's not like that. Go to hell. It is so that you can actually see, if they could have fixed that one point, or they could have fixed this one point, their relationship would have been solved. You're getting to see both sides because you're getting to see the inspired version of people's life. It's a great privilege. It is a tremendous privilege to be able to see things in this fashion, and you're going to see that today as we go along. So the times of Jeroboam. What is it that goes on in Jeroboam's life other than the fact that Jeroboam ends up getting 10 tribes as a result of some misbehavior on Solomon's part, and he puts an altar, a calf in Bethel, and then an unnamed prophet comes in and basically causes his arm to wither and the altar to crack, and there's a death there because the prophet himself didn't follow the instructions. And it's just, people use all kinds of sermon material. They make all kinds of sermon material, and I'm not saying that I'm against that. There are great lessons to be learned like that, but that is not the way to study. If you are making a sermon or you're building a sermon, that's one thing. You're trying to get at some points to help individuals see a particular thing in a sermon. But we're studying the life of these individuals, and we're basically also learning about Israel and what it is that God has going on, a purpose. Can I begin by saying, Judah is no better than Israel. Judah himself, in Genesis chapter 38, involves himself with a harlot, he thinks, and it's actually his daughter-in-law, who he ends up having a relationship with because she's dressed like a harlot, which in that particular setting in Genesis chapter 38, harlots covered themselves in a way that you couldn't recognize who they were. He had broken promises to her on 3 occasions, and now she's going to have a child by actually tricking him so that she can have what's coming to her as a descendant of being married to Judah's children, or at least one of them. And so, he ends up saying, you're more righteous than I am. Just before or just after it is revealed to him that it's his daughter-in-law, and he was about to have her burnt as a harlot. So when you think about Judah, Judah is not some significant individual that is actually better than Ephraim. Ephraim is in fact the child of Joseph. Joseph is the deliverer. He's the one that kept them alive in Egypt and made them prosperous in Egypt. He has 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Ephraim is just as good as Judah when it comes down to this. We're talking about purpose. God has a purpose. In order for him to demonstrate to you that his purposes are going to happen, he has to make choices. And it isn't necessarily anything to do with the righteousness of either one of them. So, Judah is the choice God made to bring his son into the world through his family line. Why is that important? For Judah, it's really not that important at all. But for God, in order to demonstrate to you that he can actually span 1,500 years, or even more than that, Genesis 49:10 is where it actually says that the scepter will not depart from the house of Judah until Shiloh come. He is basically saying a king is going to come out of Judah. That's 2,000 something, maybe 2,500 years. It demonstrates to you that God can span time. Nothing can stop his promises. But in order for you to keep up with his promises, you actually have to have a choice made of somebody, and you can watch, and did it happen? Are they able to keep their lineage together? Yes, they are. They were, up until God was done with that. He's not worried about who's a Jew anymore. He let the Romans destroy all of the records in AD 70. So, Judah. Ephraim, Jeroboam. They're individuals that have to be played, they're players in a scheme. And so what you need to be able to do is you need to be more familiar with the scene and what's going on. Now, what I'd like for you to see, like first of all, is I would like to remind you that Solomon is the third king in a united kingdom. Saul was the first king, David is the second king, and Solomon, his son, is chosen to be the third king. Now, one of the things that you may not be aware of in regard to Solomon and things in the backstory that you need to get a grasp on, because in order for you to actually have some pity, let's just say, on Jeroboam, or some understanding, what would you have done if you had been back there? That kind of thing. What would people today do who are arranging things all the time in such a way that is likely not pleasing to God at all? Big, humongous events like polishing the pulpit that's supposed to come up in August. Is that really according to God's plan, or is that something that people came up with trying to enhance God's plan? What would you do? And you need to realize that things are not the way they seem. In 2 Chronicles chapter 1, verse 3, so Solomon and all the congregation with him went to the high place that was at Gibeon, for there was the tabernacle of the congregation of God, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, had made in the wilderness. But the ark of God had David brought up from Kirjath Jearim to the place which David prepared for it, for he had pitched a tent for it in Jerusalem. Moreover, the brazen altar that hold on just a second. Bezaleel, need to get his name right. There is a school in Israel, Bezaleel College. Bezaleel, the son of Uriah, the son of Hur, had made. He put before the tabernacle of the Lord. Are you hearing this? Basically, Solomon goes out to a different location than Jerusalem, and he offers 1,000 offerings, 1,000 burnt offerings, and he actually isn't burning them in Jerusalem. Well, neither is Jeroboam. And so you may not realize, you may be saying anything but in Jerusalem just won't do. Well, actually, all that David did was bring the ark in, the Ark of the Covenant. And he pitched a tent, and the Ark of the Covenant is in the tent. But when Solomon went out to offer this tremendous amount of thanks and praise and honor to God, 1,000 burnt offerings, he actually was offering them on the brazen altar that came from the days of Mount Sinai, that was built at the foot of Mount Sinai in Exodus chapter 19 through 31. More of the brazen altar that Bezaleel, the son of Uriah, the son of Hur, had made, he put before the tabernacle of the Lord, and Solomon and the congregation sought unto it, and Solomon went up thither to the brazen altar before the Lord, which was at the tabernacle of the congregation, and offered 1,000 burnt offerings upon it. So, right away, what would you have done? You're basically in a time frame where things are in a state of flux, in a state of change, in a state of being prepared. And this is what you have. Did you realize that? Did you realize that he went to Gibeon? And did you realize that he offered on an altar that was not actually in place with the Ark of the Covenant? Probably not. It's a part of the backstory, and it also is a part of the reason that individuals should at least say, you know, Jeroboam saw this. He actually saw that Solomon wasn't offering in the altar that is in Jerusalem, because there was an altar in Jerusalem, but it was not nearly the size of the one that was built by Bezaleel. And Bezaleel is a famous individual, and the reason why they have the school in Jerusalem is because this individual was endued with the ability to be able to work with things that he didn't have the ability to work with. In other words, he was inspired, and this is a type of a research school, and so they named it after him, Bezaleel. Now, notice that. Backstory. 1 Chronicles 16, verse 1. So they brought the ark of God and set it in the midst of the tent that David had pitched for it, and they offered burnt sacrifices and peace offerings before God. And when David had made an end of the offering of the burnt offerings and the peace offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord. That's David. That's in Jerusalem. This other is Solomon. It's in Gibeon. It's at the tabernacle, like the tabernacle, the tent of the tabernacle. They still have the tent of the tabernacle. So, see what we're saying here? This is the backstory. It gives you an idea of what's taking place. What would you have thought if everybody left Jerusalem and they went out to Gibeon and they went to the actual tabernacle and they went to the actual altar and they offered 1,000 burnt offerings? Do you think some people would have said, this is blasphemy? David has set this up in Jerusalem. We're supposed to actually offer in Jerusalem. That's not the case. God had not decided to actually have a temple built for himself. David did not get the right to do that in Jerusalem. Therefore, you had the ability to go out to the tabernacle, the great high place. Now, 1 Kings 9:15. This is the reason of the levy which King Solomon raised, for to build the house of the Lord, and his own house, and Milo, and the wall of Jerusalem, and Hazor, and Megiddo, and Gezer. We are about to enter into the life of Jeroboam pre golden calf altar days. You need to see Jeroboam. You need to know this man. You need to realize there is way more to Jeroboam than the fact that Jeroboam goes down in history as building a golden calf, crafting a golden calf, and setting it up in Bethel and saying, here's your gods, telling the children of Israel that. And you need to find out why he did that. And then you need to ask yourself, what would you have done? And what are you doing? What kinds of things, after we decide why he did this, what was the problem inside of this man that he did this, then we must ask ourselves, how do we do the things that we do? Would we have done differently? Would we have been a great person of valor? Are we being a person of valor? Or do we just let things go? Man, woman, young people, everybody. What you're actually getting to do is you're getting to see the makeup of this individual. So what's happening? Solomon is the king. If you know the front or the end of the story, you know that Rehoboam becomes king because Caleb has already done this broadcast in front of you. Rehoboam becomes king after Solomon, and the children of Israel come and talk to Rehoboam about some changes from his dad Solomon's days. This is that discussion. It's not actually the discussion, it is the backstory for the discussion. The levy. This is the reason of the levy which King Solomon raised. The levy, the taxes that King Solomon actually put on the people, is the actual fight that they end up having in 1 Kings chapter 13, 1 Kings chapter 12. They end up arguing with Rehoboam about taxes, and Rehoboam does not relent. He says, I'm going to lay it on you. It's going to be way, way worse than my father was. Well, what in the world are we even talking about? Here it is. And this is the reason of the levy which King Solomon raised. For to build the house of the Lord, his own house, and Milo, and the wall of Jerusalem, Hazor, Megiddo, and Gezer. These are very important topics. What is he actually doing? Well, to a certain degree, some of this has to do with protection. It has to do with fenced cities in case you have different countries that are coming up, different people that you're afraid of, and you are making, your defenses. We all do it. There's a fight in our country right now over the Second Amendment. What is that? The right to protect yourself, bear arms. This is what we're talking about. He is actually setting up defenses because there's dangerous people out there. And in order to build this, in order to make this run, just like a government does, he has a tax going on. But you think about this. What's the reason of this tax King Solomon raised? To build his own house, to build the house of the Lord and his own house. And then we get down to Milo, The wall of Jerusalem, Hazor, Megiddo, and Gezer. Okay. There are two different things, or there at least one for sure, that he could have scaled back on, and that was his own house. He did not have to build such an elaborate house, and he did not have to pass such a high tax. This is the reason of the levy. 1 Kings 9:15. Now watch this. We're about to introduce Jeroboam into the picture. Notice, in 1 Kings 11:26, and Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and Ephrathite of Zeradah, Solomon's servant, whose mother's name was Zeruiah, a widow woman, even he lifted up his hand against the king. And this was the cause that he lifted up his hand against the king. Solomon built Milo and repaired the breaches of the city of David, his father. The building program of Solomon is the reason why he lifted up his hand against the king. Now, when I say that, if I were to just say that, and we were not, if we weren't together going to go through again, some backstory, and if you're seeing here that we've had 3 chapters, chapter 9, 10, and 11. And so things happen in 9, 10, and 11 that get us to the point where a servant of Solomon, I mean, one of the most powerful kings in the world at the time, people coming from all over the world just to see him, and this guy, Jeroboam, lifts up his hand against the king? What was the problem? Well, the problem had to do with, chapter 9, the levy, the building program. And now he says, well, what is it that in particular that Solomon built Milo and repaired the breaches of the city of David, his father? Now, remember, Jeroboam is a Ephrathite. It says he is Ephrathite. He is of the tribe of Ephraim. Ephrathite basically means a city somewhere in Ephraim. He is an Ephraimite. What does that mean? He is, in fact, the grandson of Joseph. His brother Manasseh is, and we're talking great here. These are individuals that are very, very, when we're talking about the way people view people, they are from a wife that was beloved, who was barren, and they were raised by Joseph in Egypt. They have some different characteristics these other individuals that are in Israel don't have. They are half. They start out being half Egyptian because Joseph is married to an Egyptian. He's actually married to the daughter of the priest of the Egyptian king. So Ephraim, Manasseh, they get 2 particular parts of land because of who they are. They're the 2 sons of Joseph. The real, I can't say real because the other children are also Jacob's children as a result of different wives, but they are, in reality, they are the sons that he would have had, and they would have been the firstborn sons. We live in the age of the World Wide Web, and one of these days, I expect to experience a nationwide outage. All of a sudden, you will not be able to use your smartphone. This is not the end time stuff. This is just the way things are. You see people getting completely cut off of Facebook. You see individuals getting completely cut off of Twitter. And I don't know the rest of them. One of these days, it's all going to shut down possibly, and we're going to just be out of our mind. So I hope that you came back and realized that we actually crashed, and we're back up again, and we were about to talk about 1 Kings 11:28. Did it crash right at that particular point? So what we had just said is, why did Jeroboam, a man of Ephraim, the tribe of Ephraim, why did he raise up his hand against the king, Rehoboam? And what was behind it. You heard what's behind it. You're basically hearing what's behind it. And here's the description of Jeroboam. And the man Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor. And Solomon, seeing the young man that he was industrious, he made him ruler over all the charge of the house of Joseph. So basically, you've got an Ephraimite, and he gets to be in charge of the house of Joseph. What does that mean? Often, Manasseh and Ephraim are just categorized together because they are brothers back several generations. They are the sons of Joseph by Rachel. And so he gets put in charge of the house of Joseph. So whatever is going on, whatever building program, or if it happens to be things that need to be taken care of from the standpoint of making decisions, it doesn't have to necessarily be the building program. He is an individual who is industrious, and he is a man of valor. And so he has moved up to be a ruler. Now, why am I making a big deal out of that? The first thing you need to realize is you don't get to start out with Jeroboam being a bad person. Jeroboam is a person. He's an individual who comes on the scene. He is not a bad person in any sense of the word at this particular point. Everything that we hear about him, everything that's being said about him is basically good. And so the internet drop was citywide, and so it came back up. So again, that's exactly what I was saying. Citywide, the internet went down. Now, so Jeroboam is not a bad person. So if you've learned anything, I'll just say this. I hope you've learned something today. I enjoy studying this. I enjoy digging in this. And in fact, this is doing me a world of good. I already studied this together with Caleb. We taught Kings and Chronicles at the Danville Church of Christ several years ago. And what I'm telling you right now, I did not include because I didn't actually process it. I wasn't digging deep as I could. We're pressing as hard as we can right now because, you know, in those days we were talking to our brethren. I love our brethren, and my lessons are very, very important. I actually preached a portion of this on Sunday, but you're getting the 2-hour version that is able to be everything be packed in that I was not able to tell them. And so I did not know this. I did not look at Jeroboam. I just had this bad idea of Jeroboam, and we're looking at good things going on with him. Things going on between 1 Kings 9 and 1 Kings 11. Things that would bother a Ephraimite. Now, what do I mean by that? I just told you he's a good man. He is a player in this account. He is going to be chosen as the opposing king by a prophet. And when we get to that, you're going to hear good things said about him. But right now, we're basically going to have a look at this block. 1 Kings 9 to 1 Kings 11, things that would bother a man who is actually the ruler of the house of Joseph. He is in charge of the well-being of Joseph and Ephraim and Manasseh. And there are things that are going on. We already have discussed the levy. Here's the cause of the levy. A particular building program that is too lavish, in my opinion. And also the amount of taxes that are going on, some of the building that's going on. Maybe Jeroboam doesn't see them as actually legitimate. Let's see. 1 Kings 9:16. For Pharaoh, king of Egypt, had gone up and taken Gezer and burned it with fire and slain the Canaanites that dwelt in the city and given it for a present unto his daughter, Solomon's wife. Okay. Who cares? Well, a person who is of the house of Joseph does, because that happens to be their land. Gezer is a city that belongs to the house of Joseph. It actually is given specifically to the tribe of Ephraim. And so you're seeing a Egyptian king come in. He burns the city. Philistines are in the city. Some of these cities, the Ephraimites have not been able to clear out everybody. He comes in and burns it, but he doesn't basically do something good with it. He gives it as a present to his own wife, to his own daughter. Now, at some point here, we're going to have to factor in the fact that Jeroboam, because of the trouble associated with him, ends up going to Egypt to live till Solomon dies. And you have other individuals that are in Egypt. People actually can get information, they can interact. He is very possibly a person who knows what goes on in Egypt. And here you have the queen of Solomon's kingdom, and she's being given this city. So, does that bother an Ephraimite? Let's see even more. Notice this, Joshua 21:20. This is where the land is being given to the different tribes. Now, if you don't actually realize, look, stuff in Joshua, I have to learn it. You have to learn it? We read it. No, you have to learn it. Because if you don't learn it, you will have no idea why this would bother an Ephraimite. Gezer is actually one of the cities that was given to the families of the children of Kohath. Kohath is the tribe of Levi, the portion of the tribe of Levi that carries the most holy thing. They don't get land in the sense of Ephraim getting a whole body of land. The Kohathites, the Levites, they actually get cities and suburbs. So Gezer and the families of the children of Kohath, the Levites, which remained of the children of Kohath, even they had the cities of their lot of the tribe of Ephraim. For they gave them Shechem with her suburbs in Mount Ephraim to be a city of refuge for the slayer, and Gezer with her suburbs. Now, can I ask you something? Do you think that Pharaoh's daughter is concerned about the tribe of Levi? And in particular, do you think she even knows who the Kohathites are? Like, does she really understand the importance of having them around? Their worship system is totally different than the Egyptians. The Egyptians worship all manner of different creatures, like beetles and snakes, just all kinds of different things in their worship setup. Their gods are sun gods and moon gods. They are basically like Greek mythology or something of that nature, if that helps any at all. And here she is, she's being given this city, and you have to ask yourself, would that bother a person of the tribe of Ephraim for this city to go into the hands of an Egyptian daughter of the king, who is Solomon's wife as well? Well, there's more. But Pharaoh's daughter came up out of the city of David unto her house, which Solomon had built for her. Then did he build Milo. Now, what does that mean? So, Solomon is building his own house. We just read that a little bit ago. Taxes levied associated with that. And here we read that Pharaoh's daughter comes up out of the city of David to her house. So he's building her a house as well. And then did he build Milo. Remember, one of the things, the reasons why Jeroboam lifted up his hand against Solomon is because Solomon was building Milo and he was repairing the breaches in the city of David. I don't know all about all of that. I can just give you backstory. I can give you information that helps you along to see what's happening to Jeroboam. Jeroboam's a good man. He watches this take place. He knows that this is a refuge city where slayers, let's say if you accidentally kill someone, you can run to a particular city, refuge city, and you can't be touched. Trial will actually take place and you're safe. Well, this city is out of play. Notice, Judges chapter 9, verse 6. This is going to give you some backstory so that you can understand that Milo is a family. And all the men of Shechem gathered together in all the house of Milo and went and made Abimelech king by the plain of the pillar that was in Shechem. See, you have to learn Judges as well. You have to, I'm saying my own self, I wasn't doing the best with keeping up when Caleb was teaching in Joshua and Judges. I had my own classes that I was responsible for, or maybe I was involved at that particular time, I don't remember, with the just multitude of administrative things that go on around here. By the way, you could be praying for Layton. He is traveling right now. I think he is in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and he had a car problem this morning. His, never mind, I know what it is, but it just has to do with his radiator and whether or not it can actually heat or overheat. And so I had introduced him, or I made some calls for him last night around that area of Fort Smith, and they didn't get together. And then this morning his car thermostat went out, and so as a result he ended up calling individuals that were already prepped to know that he was on the road, on the way to live in Virginia. I might have been involved in some of that. We've been back and forth several different places in order to take care of, as I say, administrative things that have to be done. And so I did not learn this, and I told you probably in the last few days that I didn't get this, and it was driving me crazy. Milo is a key, and I hadn't put Milo together. Now I basically have it, and you do too. All the house of Milo. These are individuals who are from Ephraim, and they have their territory, and you now can see that. People in Shechem and people in Milo. What's got Ephraim bothered? That David is building Milo. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know how extravagant it is. I don't even know that it's not the place where Pharaoh's daughter is going to live. I just know that she has been given Gezer, but that doesn't mean she's going to necessarily live in Gezer. It's a city that belongs to her. And so she has come up out of the city of David. There's more to it. Notice, in 1 Kings chapter 11, 27, and this was the cause that he lifted up his hand against King Solomon, the king. Solomon built Milo. So now you know who Milo is. You know they are people. And you know it's a city of the Ephraimites. And notice this, 2 Chronicles 8:11. And Solomon brought up the daughter of Pharaoh out of the city of David. See what we're doing here? You actually get to see a little bit more information by the fact that you have Chronicles. Chronicles pretty much talks about the kings of Judah in a more intense way, more information. Kings talks about the kings of Israel. But sometimes you put both of them together and you just have this brief statement that she came up out of the city. But what's the deal? Why did she come up out of the city? Well, basically you get a broader view. And Solomon brought up the daughter of Pharaoh out of the city of David. This is 2 Chronicles 8:11. He brought her up out of the city of David unto the house that he had built for her, for he said, my wife shall not dwell in the house of David, king of Israel, because the places are holy, whereunto the ark of the Lord hath come. That's not a really complimentary thing. Does it sound like? Do you think he told his wife? Place is too holy for you. You think maybe he said something to the effect that, the stuff that you're worshiping, that's just not going to get it here in Jerusalem, and you don't need to be even near the holy things and bringing them into contact or into the context of true worship. Could be blasphemous. I could be punished. Just any number, but you get a very, very good picture of what's taking place. Well, so she's got to have a house somewhere else. What is the reason why Jeroboam lifts his hand against the king? He's building Milo. And he is repairing breaches in the city wall of Jerusalem. I don't know necessarily what that means, but I can tell you this. Jerusalem is over 2,000 feet above sea level, and it is an extremely difficult task to come into Jerusalem and take Jerusalem, even with breaches in the wall, because of the way it lies. And so I don't know what is bugging Jeroboam about this, but I do know that what is the result of it is a tremendous tax load. That tremendous tax load is brought to Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, and it is a big discrepancy, and it involves a Ephraimite. What were we doing here? Things that would bother a person who is the ruler of the house of Joseph. Backstory. You're basically seeing it right here. A city that is a refuge city, and it is actually city suburbs for Levites, particularly the Kohathites, out of play. It is basically given to the daughter, and evidently the daughter, the queen, the daughter of Pharaoh is such that, and her behavior is such that David doesn't want her to actually be in the house in Jerusalem the way that she is and the things that she does. So he builds her a house. Taxes are levied. He's having to use money. Now, I think you can see this. It says, good man. This is my description of Jeroboam. You know, I basically know there are a lot of people out there, and I just know this because I know brethren. There are a lot of people that are listening to our school broadcast, and they're basically saying, you guys are going to put everybody on the good side. Listen, I'm going to give everybody a level playing field. I am not the judge. I am simply the reader. And the more I read, the more I see, I actually realize this was a good man in the beginning. You have a problem with him being upset about Milo? If it is the case that Milo was where the house that the daughter of Pharaoh was going to be living, and you're having to pay taxes on that in order for it to be built, and it's going to be a lavish place, that's not the only scripture that we read about the house for Pharaoh's daughter. Do you have a problem with Jeroboam being upset about Gezer? Do you have a problem with the fact that it is a gift that is given to Pharaoh's daughter, and it was, in fact, a refuge city where justice was actually to be had? I mean, what if you had killed somebody within 20 miles and you would like to be safe, and the safe city where you can't be prosecuted, you can't, somebody's relative can't just come in and eye for an eye. It's not there anymore. It is actually under the control of Pharaoh's daughter. Would you be okay? Would you be upset with that? I don't know. I don't know how people are in today. I know people do a lot of stuff in the church that is a lot worse than being upset with the things that we're actually seeing that he was upset with. Things that would bother a good Ephraimite that happens to be the ruler. Let's look at some things said about him. 1 Kings 11:31. And he said, this is actually Ahijah. Ahijah is a prophet. He is called Shiloh, a Shilonite, and that basically puts him in the proximity of where the tabernacle used to be for years and years and years. The full-out worship place was Shiloh, and he is a prophet who is from that area, and he comes into contact with Jeroboam, and he said to Jeroboam, take the 10 pieces. He had a new suit on, and Ahijah tore the suit in 10 pieces, and he said, take 10 pieces, for thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, behold, I will rend the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and I will give 10 tribes to thee. He is a man of valor. He is an industrious individual, and he is bothered with the abuses that King Solomon is involved in right in front of him, some of which are in his own country, his own tribal land. The prophet says, basically, God has made his choice. He's going to give you 10 of the tribes, and David will actually end up with Judah. And along with Judah, because of proximity, Benjamin ends up coming in. Simeon is mixed in together, and so you would have to do another study, and that is what you need to actually study to be able to see how it is that they're calling it 10 tribes, and then saying that Benjamin and Simeon are mixed in proximity, just so close that it's really difficult to make a difference between them. 1 Kings 11:37. And I will take thee, and thou shalt reign according to all that thy soul desireth, and shalt be king over Israel. And it shall be, if thou wilt hearken unto all that I command thee, and will walk in my ways, and do that is right in my sight, to keep my statutes and my commandments, as David my servant did, that I will be with thee, and build thee a sure house, as I built for David, and will give Israel unto thee. Now, I left some verses out, as you can tell, but they are verses that basically talk about all of the bad stuff that Solomon is doing. Solomon has set up all kinds of worship for his wives in the city of Jerusalem by this point. And so, Jeroboam's a good man. He is an individual who has been picked by God. He has had the same promises made to him that were made to David, if he'll be faithful like David. And so, What happens? What is it that enters into this good man's life, into his sphere of influence, whatever? What is it that caused him to end up turning out in a different way than the plan? 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 25. Then Jeroboam built Shechem and Mount Ephraim and dwelt therein, and went out from thence and built Penuel. And these are basically places that he is worrying over. Now, I have to tell you, I've skipped. We were in 11, now we're in 12. We have actually confronted Rehoboam. When Jeroboam lifted up his hand against the king, Solomon, he ended up basically trying to kill him, and he fled to Egypt. And so Solomon is dead, and the time for Jeroboam to actually step in is now at hand, and that's what we're actually looking at. And we're actually ahead of ourselves a little bit, but I just want you to see what he is up to as the reigning king. He is building Shechem, and he's building Penuel. He is worried over these places. You need to see this. You need to basically see the kind of individual that he is, even though he's involved in some other things. You know, Solomon was a good man. Solomon was a great king for a part of his life. But things happened, and we have to look at that. God gives us the story, the account, so that we can see the different things that Solomon did at the end of Solomon's life. He basically says in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 13, the end of the matter, fear God and keep his commandments. So here's an individual who is writing the book of Ecclesiastes, and he is saying that to you in the last chapter. Fear God. The whole matter is to fear God and keep his commandments. Did he do it? No. He let these women that he loved turn him away and divide his affections. Do we do that? Do we read Solomon and say tisk, tisk, and then we have a look at ourselves and we think of all the things that we have that we're so affectionate over that it's possible that when we're giving, when we're going through the process of worshiping God, and giving is worship, it is actually called a grace. We go through the process of giving, and we know that God has said, give as you have been prospered, but all these things that we have such affection for have our wallet empty by the time that comes around, and the chance to give on the first day of the week, the commanded chance to give. And can I tell you, we don't take plastic here. And so, you know, a person might listen to a lesson and they be smitten in their heart, and they don't have any cash or money in their checking account, and they wish they did, and they would like to be able to go ahead and give something, but, you know, we don't use credit cards here. You're supposed to lay by in store. Using your credit card, I'm not saying this is I'm not just going to make a decree here. You're borrowing against what you don't have in order to give what you should have laid by in store. What are we talking about? Talking about the affections that Solomon had that divided his loyalty and his service to God. Do we do any of that kind of thing? Are we pressing the button for hell for Solomon? I don't want anybody to go to hell, but I actually am thoroughly enjoying and just in awe of getting to study these individuals' lives and look at the things that created the problems in their life, because as we said last week, and I'll continue to say throughout the study of the Kings, we're basically, if you're a believer here, if you really are a believer, you're being tenderized. Your heart is being tenderized, and there's something going on inside of you that you may not even realize is going on inside of you. Let me let you look at it. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 13. Did not highlight that. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 13. For this cause also thank we God without ceasing. Because when you received the word of God, which you heard of us, you received it not as the word of men, but as it is in truth, the word of God, which effectually worketh also in you that believe. This is why we recommend this book, God at a Distance. This actually, if you want to be scholarly, somebody will tell you this is a book on epistemology. But I would just as soon let you know it is telling you why God has to keep a distance in order for him to actually see you be loyal and respond in faith so that he can have his will done and you can be blessed yourself and you can bless others. And what's taking place as we talk about things that Solomon and Jeroboam, and we're watching how their lives declined, if they did or if they didn't, and you really believe this, then this is what's happening. This is what's happening if you receive this as the Word of God and not as the word of men, but as it is in truth the Word of God, which effectually worketh also in you that believe. Effectually worketh. Can I tell you something? I have to get up at like 4 in the morning on a very regular basis these days because of the workload. Last night was Wednesday. I did not assemble with our brethren here on Wednesday night because I played out. Getting up at 4 in order not to have my phone ring and have like time where I can get inside of this. You can maybe do late night study. I don't know. I don't know if you can find the time. You know, we have children and wives and things of that nature, and all have television shows that we love that divides our loyalty and affection towards God. Early in the morning, when you're actually studying these kinds of things, you can actually, it's almost like transcending this world and moving into another world where you are taking on their life. And you're actually feeling their pain as you find out what it really is rather than just the skimming. You start seeing what's going on with these individuals and you begin to identify and you realize, oh, this is what's going on in America right now. Individuals are having problems with the fact that they're an Ephraimite. He is a person of the tribe of Dan. Judah's over here, and the favoritism seems to be for Judah. They're taxing us really heavy, and you've got things going on that really are bothering a man of conviction who is seeing a city of refuge actually just be totally wiped out and given to a Egyptian queen. And you're basically reading and thinking about Solomon and how in the world Solomon could actually deal with all the problems that he had with the scope of the kingdom and the things, you know, that he's responsible for. And it could be that Solomon was basically saying, you know, Jeroboam, if you were king, you would realize what I'm going through. And, you know, Jeroboam, if he actually would have had a chance to be able to talk to the king, I don't know if he did or not. I don't know how it is they got crossed up, but I do know the king wanted to kill him, and he ran to Egypt. He stayed there until the king died. But, you know, sometimes it's not possible, but what if it would have been possible for him to actually reason with Solomon and say, no, this business about Gezer, that is not good. Gezer is a very important place, and it happens to be one of our tribal cities, and you are destroying what God set up in Joshua. God had a very, very important reason for having these cities and also to take care of the priests. You concerned about the Kohathites? They're the ones who move the furniture around and touch the holy things. They're the ones who can go in and minister in these areas. Well, you know, that might have gone just right over Solomon's head because Solomon got these women and they've got their worship that he's got to worry about. And, you know, I could just hear Solomon saying, no, Jeroboam, do you realize the kinds of worship that I'm having to deal with? All the different things that that are required of me to keep these women happy and therefore keep their kingdoms happy. Edom, Moab, Ammon, Egypt. He has to do a lot of compromising and, let's say, what the Secretary of State has to deal with when he goes around to all these countries. Solomon's got his hands full trying to keep his realm protected. And there's a problem right there. We're going to look at that as we talk about Jeroboam himself. So I'm saying, tenderize. Let your heart actually have an open time frame where you can actually see what's going on. A good man who is worried over good things. He's worried over these places. And here's going to be a thing. It's only going to be the case like, but no, one is the big deal about Mount Ephraim and worrying about these things. Now, we are about to touch Jeroboam's problem. And we are also touching Solomon's problem too, because Solomon could have been trusting in God. He could have been trusting in God more and not marrying all these different queens, which represent heads of state that are actually living around him in Jerusalem, who can say to their father or their brother, if he's king, or a prince, whoever, and give Solomon a break. This is really good. Solomon's doing a good job. These are just dignitaries that are all around him, and he's afraid. Can I ask you, are we men and women of valor? And we're basically on guard, on duty, and we're worried about very important things? Notice this. And Jeroboam said in his heart, now shall the kingdom return to the house of David. What's happened? Basically, if you're watching school, Caleb covered the division of the kingdom. He covered Rehoboam refusing to give in to the demands of the 10 tribes that came in, and Jeroboam was their spokesman. So they divided. And Jeroboam goes out, he has 10 tribes, and we're seeing we're seeing the inside, we're seeing his makeup, we're seeing the thing that people deal with. And Jeroboam said in his heart, now shall the kingdom return to the house of David. If this people go up to do sacrifice in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then shall the heart of the people turn again unto the Lord, unto their Lord, which will be Rehoboam, even unto Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they shall kill me, and go again to Rehoboam, king of Judah. 8. Do you remember what we just got through saying? If you are hearing the word of God and you're receiving it, the word of God, which effectually works in them that believe, would you be having this problem? Because an approved prophet, Ahijah the Shilonite, came in and told you what was going to happen before it happened, and here you are now, you have 10 of the tribes. You are a reigning king. And so you see God keeping his promise, and you're looking now at the problems that Solomon had, keeping all this stuff together. And what does he do? He ends up saying, if you do right, afraid what's going to happen, rather than having the word of Ahijah in the back of his mind and saying, no, God said that he's going to make your house just like the house of David, that I will continue to have sons that are reigning from Ephraim, and God's going to take care of us. But all of a sudden, whatever it is, folks, this is the meat of our lesson. What are you afraid of? As a preacher, let me talk to preachers. I expect that there are preachers that are listening to our broadcast, to our class. I expect there are individuals who are teaching classes and are prepping themselves to even do more. If you ever get on salary, your life is going to totally change. It doesn't have to change, but I'm just telling you, it will change. You will start dealing with things. I'm talking about salary in the sense that you're being paid. All of a sudden, brethren recognize your abilities, let's say, and they say, we would like for this individual to be teaching here because he's doing such a fabulous job and he is encouraging us, and we're growing and we're wanting to do more for the Lord. Then you preach on something that someone in the congregation or some group in the congregation doesn't actually want to hear. I have a friend who told me that there is a video up on a website in a particular area. I don't want to out my friend because he's giving me information that helps me to see what's going on. And he said that a deacon got up and did a devotional on Wednesday a couple of weeks ago, sometime in that time frame, and he just basically bashed door knocking. Now, if you're being taught and encouraged and trained through our classes, what would you do about that? Can I tell you just a quick anecdotal? This past week, an individual who supported me for 31 years, it was week before last, his funeral was on Saturday, just passed. He supported me for 31 years, through thick and thin. Often I was in a position where I was either being fired or I was actually being cut. My entire support system was being cut off. In other words, the checkbook was closed, and I'm living 8,000 miles away in the Marshalls, and I'm being told no more checks are coming to the Marshalls. Like, starve you out. And, you know, I basically fly home on plastic, and I talk to these guys, and I'm like, you know, you really don't have that authority. You are individuals, number one, that promised me that you would never leave us and starve us out. You would never leave us in a foreign field. And number two, the money that comes through your checkbook is not actually under your control. It is a situation akin to 2 Corinthians chapter 8, where you're keeping things honest. In other words, people, 48 churches of Christ here on stateside are not sending money directly to me. They're sending it through your checkbook, and you answer for what I get, so that nobody can actually say Johnny's out there living up on $20,000 a year. I mean, $20,000 a month. And you're in a position to keep things honest. But what you're actually doing is you're choosing to lord it over me and cutting my salary, cutting my funds off, my work fund to travel into different countries where we've set up congregations. And not only that, my wife and Caleb are still over there. Now, where does my brother fit in? He actually was a member of that congregation, and he took my side. He did not stop supporting me and continued to advocate for me. What did I do? I had to basically leave their office, having been fired, if they never really were in charge of me anyway. But the word went out that I was fired, and also they put out a bad rap on me, and so I had a choice. What did I do? I'm pretty good with plastic. I mean, I'm good with paying it off. I basically used plastic to re-raise all of the funds that were coming in from 48 churches that had confidence in me to go over there and do that work. 46 of them were willing, and they were stretched from Texas to West Virginia, into Ohio, several just all over the place. Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana, Arkansas, Tennessee, just Oklahoma, just all over the place. Had to visit all of them. I didn't spend a lot of time trashing these individuals, not telling you even who they are to this day. I'm just telling you. That friend supported me for 31 years, and he died, and we went to the funeral on Saturday. Matter of fact, Caleb flew from here, from Raleigh, nonstop, 6 a.m. flight, go to the funeral at 11:30, gets back on a plane, supposed to be at 3:30, maybe 4, and he's delayed, ends up getting on his plane at 5, and flies nonstop again back to Raleigh. That was to Orlando, then from Orlando back to Raleigh on a Saturday, and basically never misses a step. But here's the thing. Caleb spoke for 2 minutes, and he basically told about my good friend and brother who's been supporting me for 31 years, how he came when Caleb was just a young person, maybe 13 years old, maybe younger. He came and stayed with me for 2 weeks, His name is Guy Dickinson. Stayed with me for 2 weeks. We knocked doors the entire time. We actually had a Bible study set up with a Baptist pastor who didn't show up to his Bible study because he was off doing something immoral. And another person called me at the same time who was another Baptist pastor. And he said, I was going to debate you, but I've been studying baptism my own self, and I've convinced myself I'm wrong. And I would actually be willing to obey the gospel if you could convince me that denominationalism is wrong. Well, in point of fact, the lesson that I had prepared for the other pastor was that very lesson. Why denominationalism is sinful, because I had told him on an occasion when we were talking together, he was in the biggest Baptist church here in Martinsville, I told him, you're not a Christian. He said, you just cannot imagine how he looked when he heard that. He said, no one has ever told me that I'm not a Christian. And I said, well, you're not a Christian, you're in a denomination. And he had asked me to produce a lesson, a personal Bible study together to show him how it is that I could actually prove that he is not a Christian. The other Baptist pastor said, if you can show me that denominationalism is sinful, I will obey the gospel. We took the lesson that the other pastor missed on a February icy day, went over to the house where the other guy was, presented him the lesson, and he obeyed the gospel. Caleb spent 2 minutes telling about that door knocking, that story about the Baptist pastor who didn't show up, the Baptist pastor who did take the lesson, and then that pastor went on to debate on television 2 Presbyterian pastors at the same time. He went on to debate a Pentecostal pastor on television as well, and Caleb's memory may be faded. There was a lot of people from a lot of places, and we're not in that venue very often. We don't do lectureships and things of that nature, so he's basically trying to put all this together. He failed to tell him that Pentecostal pastor also obeyed the gospel after that debate. And so 2 minutes, and he was basically telling the world over YouTube, that was a funeral that's covered on YouTube, about the good of door knocking. Now, if you were preaching or you were teaching a class or whatever, and that deacon got up on a Wednesday night and did the devotional and said, door knocking, bash door knocking, it doesn't do any good, what would you do? What was I talking to you about? I was talking to you about if you become a salaried evangelist, your life is going to change. You know why? Because you will find out that these individuals to whom you're speaking, to whom you're trying to minister, they will cut your salary if you preach things that aggravate them or their wives or their children or their grandchildren. Can I ask you, as you think about Jeroboam, what would you do? What if you're already a salaried evangelist and you don't door knock, you basically pet members who are already saved? What are you doing? Because you're actually, if you're an evangelist, you're being paid to do the work of an evangelist. I mean, that is a description in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7. Now, what are you doing? Well, I am in that congregation that is in I'm in that congregation that you were talking about, Johnny, where the deacon got up and bashed. And I'd lose my job if I said anything. Well, the thing about it is you really don't know the future. I actually had to oppose the Collinsville Church of Christ, and I was afraid. I had just gotten back to the United States, only been here 2 years and 3 months, and I basically had to cross them. I began to see that they are aiding and abetting false teachers. And they brought one in to hold a gospel meeting, and I basically refused to even go to the meeting. I'm not even going to sit there. I already rebuked the individual publicly in front of our area-wide men's retreat, and then when we got back from the retreat, we were supposed to be the hosting congregation that year, and so he was going to preach where I was working. And I'm just like, no, the dude's a false teacher. I can show you the information. I can show you who he's involved with. I'm not sitting and listening. If you want me in the assembly, what you're going to end up getting is me rebuking him publicly again. And they fired him. But you know what? My friend of 31 years, he actually helped me set up the paperwork for the Church of Christ here, this building, to actually become a new plant. He helped set up the paperwork, a very smart individual, Guy Dickinson, Ernest Burnett, and the property passed over to the Collinsville elders. And once this all started happening, I realized that there had been some foul play amongst the elders, individuals signing paperwork that they were not qualified to sign, and I called their hand on it. And we ended up basically, I didn't have a check. They just cut me off. No, you're not going to get paid at all. We have a verbal agreement that you've got 90 days to find a new place, and we got 90 days to look for a new preacher. And I said, well, I'm not telling anybody to come here, that's for sure. And I got up and told the congregation what they're up to, and so I didn't get a dime. So here I am. Only been in the United States for 2 years and 2 months. Don't have a paycheck. Really? Is that how these stories go? Is it the case that God has something more than what I was actually getting? Yes. 2/3 of the congregation just basically flipped and said, this is not going to happen while we're sitting here. This guy is a true blue evangelist. We met in the Dutch Inn. 2/3 of the congregation met the first Sunday. Guy Dickinson was there. Ernest Burnett was there. And they were there basically to legitimize yet again the work that I was doing and how people were going to blackball me. And so we entered this location, and we've been here ever since. And as a result of making that decision, all kinds of wonderful things have happened. But I'm saying, as we think about Jeroboam and his heart, how is yours when it comes to dealing with family members, dealing with friends at work? We make up our mind oftentimes. We make up our minds that our friends are not going to listen. They'll be mad. That getting mad is like going to be the end, because people that, like the guy who said door knocking won't work, they basically believe that there are no people out there who will realize that they're being given the Word of God, and once upon realizing they have seen the Word of God, 1 Thessalonians 2:13, they then believe it, and it effectually works. See how that works? We're actually putting the light under a bushel and claiming that door knocking doesn't work. Door knocking works. This young man, Leighton, that's on his way over here to move to Virginia, 2 other ladies that you've seen on our broadcast, Yasmin and Isabel the mother, Yasmin the daughter, they were out in a park handing out cards and talking to people, and they handed him one, studied with him, got some other individuals involved, and he obeyed the gospel. And now he's on his way to come and work with us here in Virginia. If this people go up to do sacrifice in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then shall the heart of this people turn again under their Lord. That really doesn't have to be the case, Jeroboam. Now, 1 Kings chapter 12:29, he did. Finally got around to it. I'm just gonna hit it, and we'll get at it in another setting. He set up a calf in Bethel, and the other one he put in Dan. Now, notice what we actually said in 12:25. He is building up Shechem and Penuel. He's scared, and he ends up making this mistake. I don't know why he did this. I can actually put forward some ideas that would make you lessen your pressure on him. I'm not saying that he's going to be right in any sense, but as I said a moment ago, there's a lot of things going on here. There are a lot of factors that are being played out in front of us. Solomon continued to have worship. He worshiped 3 different feasts a year in Jerusalem while he had these gods, these wives, and these gods set up. He still had a part of his heart that was affectionate to God, and he was trying to do something. He was trying to keep the kingdom together. Solomon wasn't as Baptists and Calvinists say, totally depraved. He was an individual who had a conscience. And as I said, Ecclesiastes 12:13, he ended up saying, here is basically the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments. Now, that's what he did. That's what Jeroboam did. He set up a calf and he said to the people, here's your God. You don't have to go down to Jerusalem. Now, can I give you some more information? Some back story that would maybe help you to recognize what this Ephraimite, this person who was the ruler of the land, a ruler of his tribe, and then became king of the 10 tribes. He ends up taking care of places that are extremely important. Shechem, Penuel, Bethel, these are places that happen to be in his tribal land. And a lot of times people don't realize that as he's trying to think of a way to work out what he's doing, he is in fact in a position to make sure that certain things are taken care of. It says he began to build Shechem and Penuel. Look at this. Genesis 28:18. This is all connected intricately with what's taking place. And Jacob rose up early in the morning, and he took the stone that he had put for his pillow, and he set it up for a pillow and poured oil upon the top of it, and he called the name of the place Bethel. This is where the calf is now. But the name of that city was called Luz at first, and Jacob vowed a vow, saying, if God be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and raiment to put on, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then shall the Lord my God, then shall the Lord be my God. And this stone which I have set for a pillar shall be God's house. And all that thou shalt give me, I will surely give the 10th unto thee. Genesis 28:17. What got him to the position where he would say such a thing is what's in verse 17. He wakes from a dream where he is seeing angels descend and descend. And then he wakes from the dream and he was afraid. And he said, how dreadful is this place? This is none other but the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Now, basically, they're now worshiping in Bethel. I'm not saying it's right. I am actually telling you why individuals could be convinced to be involved in such a thing. Fade, and I wasn't asking you to. I've got to talk to my producer just a minute without my mic. What's taking place here? Jacob, their father, the patriarch, wakes from a dream and he says, Bethel is the house of God, God's house. If I get brought back, he's running from Esau. If I get brought back here by God, God will be my God, and this shall be his house. As he wakes from the dream, he actually says, this is none other but the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Now, the 10 tribes basically are all children of Jacob. And Joseph is the delivering son of Jacob. You all know that. He got them into Egypt, and he basically took care of them, and they became a great people in Egypt. And they are basically listening to Jacob. They are listening to Jeroboam. And they know their own history. Bethel is a very important place if you're listening to Jacob. Now, yesterday, Caleb covered the division, and one of the things that was said in the division between Rehoboam and Jeroboam, the 10 tribes, and Rehoboam and Judah, they basically said, what do we have to do with Judah? What do we have from Jesse? What is there for us? And then he said, Israel, to your tents. We're basically going to make it on our own as 10 tribes, and I'll be your king. So They are now in a position where the people are looking at things that are very important, that are part of their entire history. Jacob, their patriarch, their last of the patriarchs. And here's Jacob's dream while he was running away. Now, Jacob now is coming back from having been in a foreign land, we're just going to say Padan Aram, where he's found his wife Rachel, and some of his children are born. His brother-in-law's name is Laban. He's running from Laban. It just seems that Jacob is having difficulty all the time. He's running from Laban. He has a 3-day head start, and Esau is in front of him. He has gotten away from Laban, but now he still has to face Esau, and he thinks that Esau is still angry with him, and so he sets his children, his different children, in different tiers in front of him across the river. And what the idea is that Esau will come into contact with these different family members and all of their children and their things, and eventually he will come down to Jacob, and that's where he is. He's basically alone, and he is alone in Penuel. Genesis 32:27. And he said unto him, the angel, he wrestles with an angel all night long in Penuel, and he ends up overcoming the angel, or the angel's not able to overcome him. And he said unto him, what is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel, for as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. Now, are you seeing what we're seeing here? Here's what Jeroboam is doing. It's not like Jeroboam just takes a nosedive. Immediately, we basically know that Jeroboam has set up that calf. And we're looking at the extenuating circumstances, and we all know that Jeroboam is a continually person, a continual hiss and a byword. Can we say it like that? If a king ends up being bad, they say he actually followed in the steps of Jeroboam, and they worship the calf. Nobody's trying to make Jeroboam out to be an individual that we're going to give a pass to. But we are basically saying, as this all transpires, he is at Bethel, he's scared, he knows that Rehoboam is not a fair man, because Rehoboam would not lift the taxes, he would not lift the burden. He said it would be worse. He uses a metaphor to describe how much worse it's going to be. Let's just say 20 times worse. I'm going to be 20 times worse than my father. I am going to be a taskmaster. They have divided, and Jeroboam is scared. And Bethel, he basically knows his history. He knows that this is Jacob's choice for the house of God. Jacob doesn't have the right to actually say that Bethel is the house of God. He doesn't have the right to say this is the gate to heaven. He's just making an exclamation as a result of waking out of a tremendous dream. Now he has been wrestling with an angel, and he has overcome the angel, or the angel's not been able to overcome him, with the exception of him actually being a bit lame. And he changed his name and said, you are a prince and with men, and has prevailed. And the Bible says, we just got through reading in 1 Kings chapter 12, 27 or 28, that he began to build Penuel. And he ends up saying about Penuel, the wording has to do with the idea of seeing God face to face. And Jacob called the name of the place Penuel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. So here are monumental places in Israel, and he is building them up. He is setting up his kingdom and making sure these places are looked after. Shechem was the other place, Penuel and Shechem in Mount Ephraim, Genesis 33:18. And Jacob came to Shalem, a city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padan Aram, and he pitched his tent before the city, and he bought a parcel of land where he had spread his tent, and the hand of the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money, and he erected an altar and called it El Elohe Israel. And now, this is him having wrestled with the angel. He has met with Esau. Things are well. He now is back in the land of Canaan, and he comes to Shechem. And things are well at this moment. But immediately following getting here, his only daughter goes out to see the women of the land, and the Shechemites rape her. And two of his sons basically go in and concoct a plan where they just basically are able to kill all the men. That's chapter 34. In chapter 35, in 34, he said, "You've made me stink in front of the people of the land," and he begins a move. Got to get out of here. Genesis 35, 1. Notice what happens. We're introducing to you Bethel and Shechem from another vantage point. And God said unto Jacob, "Arise, go up to Bethel, and dwell there, and make there an altar unto God." Now, I'm just saying, as people justify their behavior often, like you're not doing what you need to be doing, let's say you're not being evangelistic, and so you basically come up with a plan where, Caleb talked about a plan yesterday where you give money to people in a foreign field that you don't know what they're doing. And it somehow or other enables you to feel good about the fact that you're not doing evangelism at home. And you might not like me saying that. I really don't care, because I've worked overseas, and one of the reasons why I ended up having to come home is because the reports that my coworkers were giving were just totally fabricated and inflated, and I would write a report that was different, and I just was not going to participate in that, money or no money. And so individuals often do not know what's going on in foreign fields, and if you're not there and someone is telling you what's going on, they maybe take a trip. And I went on a trip with one of my coworkers, got off the plane, and a guy comes up and he says, "Hey, brother, we baptized 6 people today." What? You haven't seen him in 6 or 8 months, and this is what you're basically setting forward? You baptized 6 people in one day just before the plane gets here? I actually was responsible for that work. Ultimately, I was over there with this gentleman to be introduced to it. I flew over in a work that I was supposed to be involved in on a regular basis. I flew there unannounced, and they weren't even meeting. And one of my other coworkers had written that they had 8 preachers on location, local indigenous preachers. Not true. You hear what I'm saying? People come up with ideas of how they're going to make up for the fact that they're not doing what they need to be doing here locally, like getting the gospel out. And when we look at Jeroboam and we say, "Man, that was a bad plan," it was in a time when Israel, Judah wasn't being faithful for 3 years. Rehoboam tried to do right, and the next thing you know, Rehoboam is doing equally wicked, and God brings in the king Shishak, that was the king of Egypt when Jeroboam was over in Egypt, and they end up serving a Egyptian pharaoh. They humbled themselves when they were told that they were going to be punished, and they had to serve. And basically, we would look at Rehoboam as an individual who was rehabilitated as a result of the things that happened. But do you see what I'm saying here? Do you see what you're actually reading here? Jacob said, "Build an altar." God said to build an altar. And God said to Jacob, "Arise, go up to Bethel, dwell there, and make an altar unto God that appeared unto thee when thou fleddest from the face of Esau thy brother." So you have precedent for an altar to be in Bethel. And we just got through reading that Solomon was going up to Gibeon to offer at an altar that was different than what David was offering in Jerusalem, where the Ark of the Covenant was. And as soon as he finished offering the 1,000 burnt offerings, then he ends up having a dream. All of you pretty much know the dream and the statement that was made and the blessing that was given to Solomon. I'm not in any way making excuses for this individual, but I am simply saying he's living the same life you're living. And the compromises that we make, these are the compromises that they make. They're just different in scale in our minds. But when you just basically say, "I'm too afraid to do what I'm being paid to do as a gospel preacher," man, I wouldn't be pushing any buttons on Jeroboam. Jeroboam knew that Jacob had an altar at Bethel, and continue. Then Jacob said unto his household and to all that were with him, put away the strange gods which are among you, and be clean, and change your garments. And let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make there an altar unto God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and was with me in the way which I went. And they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand, and all the earrings which were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the oak which was by Shechem. And they journeyed, and the terror of God was upon the cities that were round about them, and they did not pursue after the sons of Jacob. Jacob was scared to death too, and he straightened his life out. Jacob was scared to death of the family members of the Shechemites. They had just slaughtered the males, and they were strangers in the land. They did not want to be looked at as troublemakers. And so they're scared to death. And they end up doing, that's Jacob. We're not talking about Jeroboam right now. Jeroboam is building up Shechem and building up Penuel. He's making sure that these places remain in Israel's mind as important places. And they're not going to be taken over by Rehoboam or whatever is going to happen. So, notice, Joshua 24:14. What I'm doing here is I'm telling you the importance of these things that have the attention of Jeroboam while we're also looking at the other part of his life. Now, therefore, the fear of the Lord, Joshua 24:14, we're talking about Shechem. He's building up Shechem and Penuel. Now, therefore, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in truth. You recognize this? This is the last words of Joshua. He said, serve him in sincerity and truth. You want to know what John 4:24 means? God is the Spirit. They that worship him in spirit and in truth. Here it is. Sincerity and truth. God wants your spirit involved. That's what he's talking about. He doesn't want you from the teeth out, lips that say that you love God, but your heart is far from him, in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your father served on the other side of the flood and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And the people answered and said, God forbid that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. Now, 24:25. So Joshua made a covenant with the people that day and set them a statute and an ordinance in Shechem. And Joshua wrote the words in the book of the law of God and took a great stone and set it there under an oak that was by the sanctuary of the Lord. And Joshua said unto all the people, behold, this stone shall be witness unto us, for it hath heard all the words of the Lord, which he spake unto us. It shall be therefore a witness unto you, lest you deny God. Important place. 31. And Israel served the Lord God all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders that overlived Joshua, which had known all the works of the Lord and that he had done in Israel. And the bones of Joseph, which the children of Israel brought out of Egypt, buried they in Shechem, and the parcel of ground which Jacob bought of the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for 100 pieces of silver, and it became the inheritance of the children of Joseph. See what's happening here? Did you know that the important thing in Jeroboam's life, even though Jeroboam was afraid and had basically made a compromising situation because of his fear, here's an individual who is trying to make sure that these places that are important to Israel's history, and you're going to be reading Shechem through the rest of the entire Old Testament. You'll be reading about Penuel, and you will certainly be reading about Bethel. And the bones of Joseph were buried there in the tribal lands of Jeroboam, Ephraim. Joshua 24:29. And it came to pass after these things that Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died, being 110 years old. And they buried him in the border of his inheritance in Timnath-serah, which is in Mount Ephraim on the north side of the hill of Gash. He is buried. Joshua is buried in Ephraim as well. Verse 33, and Eleazar, son of Aaron, died, and they buried him in a hill pertaining to Phinehas, his son, which was given him in Mount Ephraim. See, all of these important things that are going on in the life or in the area of Jeroboam. and he is concerned about them. You know, I read about these characters and I see the cards that they were handed, the life that they had to deal with. I mean, you're basically a man of valor and you are an industrious individual and you recognize that King Solomon is not doing your people right. And you stand up to him and a prophet comes along and basically says, God is saying, I'm going to give you 10 tribes. You're going to be the king, and I'll make your house sure like the house of David if you'll continue to follow me. Next thing that happens, the next thing you know, you find yourself in a position where you're just full on into it with Rehoboam. Rehoboam has 130,000 in his army, and you're thinking about, well, what are we going to do? Because Solomon has now built the house of God, and the altar is for sure, the altar that was at Gibeon is not there anymore. The altar for real is in the house that Solomon built for God. People are still going up to Gibeon and worshiping, and in other high places, the Bible continues to say. And as all of this is taking place, the Levites are realizing that they're no longer needed because they're not going to worship at Bethel and at Dan. They're not going to be involved in that calf worship. So they end up beginning to move out. But I want you to notice this. In 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 1, Shechem, again, demonstrating to you the importance of Shechem, the importance to Jeroboam, the importance to Rehoboam as he tries to instate himself as the king when his father died. Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel were come to Shechem to make him king. And it came to pass, when Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who was yet in Egypt, heard of it, for he was fled from the presence of King Solomon, Jeroboam dwelt in Egypt, for he dwelt in Egypt. Is this a ploy? Rehoboam is trying to insert himself or instate himself as the king of the entirety of Israel, just like his father. And so what does he do? He goes to a very, very endearing place in Ephraim to meet the people. And we know things about Shechem, such as Joseph's bones are buried there. There is a stone of witness that is there as well, where everybody determined to serve God and get rid of all their gods, and they put the gods under an oak in Shechem. And it's called a pillar to this day, or a stone, not to this day, but I'm saying as they talk. Is this a ploy, him coming to this particular place? Judges chapter 9, and all the men of Shechem gathered together, and all the house of Milo, and went and made Abimelech king by the plain of the pillar that was in Shechem. That's how they did it when Abimelech was trying to become king, Gideon's son. Is this a ploy? Is he involved in something nefarious? Not really. 2 Samuel 5, verse 3. So all the elders of Israel came to the king to Hebron, and King David made a league with them in Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. What Rehoboam was doing is he was trying to make a covenant with all of the tribes. But basically what happens is Jeroboam comes in and calls his hand. You're at Shechem. We know that you recognize that Shechem is a place that is very dear to all of us. It is a field or an area in Ephraim, and you've come to meet us all and present yourself and basically make agreements for what you're going to do for the kingdom, the united kingdom. And Jeroboam faces Rehoboam and ends up making happen what God said was going to happen through Ahijah the Shilonite. He basically brings things to a head and he says, to your tents, Israel, we have nothing in Judah. And then he is, in his mind, he is left to try to figure out what to do, and he was afraid. You know, I am just going to say to you, let me hydrate here just a second. I feel for these people. And as you become intimate with them, you learn their story, you learn the predicaments, there's really no way that you can just go around just gladly condemning them. I pity Jeroboam, and I look at events in my own life, and I just told you a couple stories and they sounded good. I was scared to death. Scared to death. But I had already seen life without God. Some of you, if you don't know it, eventually you will know it, because these things just come out. Because there are people that are bound and determined that they're going to have you see me as from a different perspective, as if that's going to help them. I've already seen the other life without God, being incarcerated as an 18-year-old for 2 years. And in those times of fear, I'm saying as a Christian, I basically think about the idea of playing around with God and acting as if I'm one thing while I'm really another. And I'm not telling you that I am always on target and that I've got it all together. I'm not telling you that. I am telling you that when I study these accounts and I look at the events that they go through, I am encouraged to try to figure out industrious ways to handle situations. I try to visualize situations that we get ourselves in, and I try to compare them to the life of Jeroboam. And I now understand Jeroboam a lot better. I understand the backstory. I understand the things that were going on between he and Solomon. This man was a tremendously strong, useful individual that God had great plans for. But fear, 1 Chronicles 12:22, for at that time, day by day, there came to David to help him until it was a great host like the host of God. You know what we're reading here? This is basically David deciding that he is going to make an agreement with the people of Israel to be their king. And the Bible says that day by day, there came to David to help him until it was a great host like the host of God. You don't know really who all is out there and is available on our side. But I can tell you this, there are individuals that are on our side that are extremely important. I really should not. 2 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 9. But know this, Caleb will be teaching you about a king named Asa. And Asa became afraid as well. This is the statement that was made by, I believe it's going to be a prophet whose father's name is Jehu. And I can't remember. Is Hananiah is the prophet, the seer. And he tells Asa in his time of fear that for the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth, show himself strong in behalf of them whose heart is perfect toward him. Herein thou hast done foolishly, therefore from henceforth thou shalt have wars. The Eyes of Jehovah, a book that we recommend, and sometimes we give it away. We are not able to find them very often these days. But it is the life of James A. Harding. And just so you know, James A. Harding did not establish Harding College. James A. Harding was in the Nashville Bible College, and his grandson-in-law, I believe is how that goes, Lloyd Klein Sears, who was at the time employed at Harding, wrote the biography of his I just can't make myself say that it's his wife's father, but it could be his wife's father. It could be that he was the son-in-law of James Harding. And he tells all kinds of things that Harding was able to do because of his belief in this particular passage. Do you know James A. Harding never had a schedule for gospel meetings? Can you imagine living like that? Remember I was talking to you about being on salary? He also was opposed to salaried preachers. And I'm not saying, when I say opposed, I'm not saying that he basically drew a line throughout the entire brotherhood and didn't have anything to do with men that were salaried. He was opposed to what he was seeing it do. He said it turned them into stall-fed clergy. Stall-fed clergy. You're basically being taken care of, and you just end up doing the bidding of the people that are paying you. James Harding never had a schedule for his gospel meetings. People derided him, and they were infuriated with him. What does it mean? It means that James Harding never left a meeting while it was actually producing. People were obeying the gospel. He never left one to go to another one with the idea that I need to be over there because I basically have made a schedule with them and they're going to be paying me to come over here. So he did not have an itinerary. He would hold meetings that would last, I'm not even going to say, just unbelievable things that he would do. And he himself would do a lot of the work. Say, for instance, sweep the building, buy the coal, keep the heater warm, put out the books, just all kinds of things. And this is a passage that we need to put in our repertoire when we're talking about fear. There were a host of people, day by day, that came to David to help him until it was a great host, like the host of God. And there is God himself, whose eyes run to and fro throughout the earth, show himself strong, half of them whose heart is. You know, I basically find out that there are people that I don't know about just about every month. We have individuals that they have not made necessarily a commitment to Caleb and I, but there are people like you, people that are listening to me. Someone texted me from California just a minute ago, earlier. Individuals that we send a book to, and they end up asking to give them some information so they can support us. And I don't know that I want Caleb to hear this. We're so busy that I have 3 or 4 of them that are waiting on an address, and I haven't given them the address. I just can't keep all of that stuff going. And so, but I do appreciate the fact that you're out there, and I know that once I do send you a means by which you can actually help us in the work that we do, still going to do that, and we appreciate you for that. And you probably appreciate the fact that we didn't just say, man, here's my address, and just start pouring it in here. We are supported by individuals. We have a couple of congregations now that actually support us. And as I said, one of my longtime supporters died last week. And so we don't know who's going to help us. And we're afraid at times, but we're basically, in our mind, we have made it up in our mind that we're going to overcome our fears. We're going to trust in God, and we're going to watch these participants in these Kings and Chronicle accounts. We're going to do our very best to build within you the same kind of trust and faith that they demonstrate on their good days. We're also going to let you know that we're praying for all of the people that watch. What does the Bible say? We can't pray for all of you by name, but there are a host of individuals out there that are watching What Does the Bible Say? And we're praying for you that we would be able to overcome this famine in our land. And I am not talking about COVID. I'm talking about a famine of the Word of God, Hosea 4:6. And we're praying that you will be a door knocker, that you'll be a person who will go out and make sure that somebody gets to hear the truth of God's Word. And can I tell you this? It's a very easy thing to knock on a door and basically tell the person, because they're looking at you and trying to figure out, why are you here? You can just simply tell them. You can do a 3x5 card and just have this verse on it, John 17:20. Notice this. Yep, making me go over. John 17:20. Neither pray I for these alone, but for all them that believe on me through their word, that they all may be one. You can basically say this, and I've used this line for 30 years. I know that you're religious, and probably, and I'm religious. But you know, there is still something that God wants from us. They're going to be like, what is that? Here's either you quote it to them, show it in the Bible, give them a card, 3x5, and you tell them, God wants us to be together, like He and His Son were together. And Jesus' divinity depends on it. The idea that Jesus would be believed, that God sent Him, is actually at stake. Division is from the devil, and every house or city or government, kingdom that is divided is going to fail. We're never going to do any better until we unite, and we have to unite through this passage, the words of the individuals that Jesus was speaking to, and they were the apostles in the garden before Jesus died. It's not hard. Then you show them Matthew 16:18. I have knocked so many doors in towns where I've actually lived in older times in the 80s, and the individuals would say, when I say, I'm a member of the Church of Christ, and they'd say, I know Matthew 16:18, upon this rock I'll build my church. What a wonderful thing that they actually know that is, in fact, there. And every time, this would be my prayer, every time they say my church themselves, they would actually be reminded that Jesus said it's His church. So don't be fearful. And if we can encourage you, you have our information up. And these are the ways to get in touch with us. As I say often to people, I don't mind talking to people, but only so many hours in the day. And text and emails, we try our very best. We don't have a secretary. We have someone that works 2 days a week, and she is inundated with stuff to do on those 2 days a week. So we're doing the best we can, and we really do appreciate you, and we want you to tell someone about What Does the Bible Say School. God bless you. Have a good afternoon.